What's in the box? Pain.
Sorry, I just had to rewatch the Denis Villeneuve Dune trailer, like, for the bajillionth time, just to, watch the weird taste that the David Lynch film left me with, because, yeah, that film is so weird. Dune is a 1984 film adaptation of the novel written by Frank Herbert. Directed by David Lynch, it stars Kyle MacLachlan as Paul Atreides, Francesca Annis as Lady Jessica, Patrick Stewart as Gurney Halleck, as well as many others. Right off the bat, this film as an adaptation of the novel is either word for word or it's nothing like it at all, particularly with its portrayal of certain characters like the Harkonnens. Like, I don't understand how David Lynch missed the mark on them that badly, like... Oh my god. That being said, I will say, if you were to watch this film, you would basically have an understanding of the Dune novel, because the film does cover most of the major plot points from the book. The Gom Jabbar trial.
What's in the box?
Pain.
Paul training with Gurney, the Atreides relocating to Arrakis, the attempted assassination of Paul with the Hunter-Seeker, Dr. Yue betraying House Atreides to the Harkonnens, Paul and Jessica escaping into the desert, etc, etc. I'm not going to break down the entire novel of Dune for you, there are other videos on YouTube for that. As a whole, the film does cover most of the events of the novel, just the problem is that it's paced horribly. Now, the book itself is split into 3 parts. Part 1 is Dune, Part 2 is Muad'Dib, and Part 3 is The Prophet. For the first hour and 20 minutes of the Lynch film, it covers Parts 1 and 2 fairly well. It's just when it gets to Part 3, it just completely skips over a bunch of things and just rushes to the big battle at the end. I will say, my biggest problem with Part 1 is that it keeps repeating information over and over again, even though the information they're providing is really self-explanatory. It just pads the runtime, and it could have been better spent with Paul and Jessica's time with the Fremen, because their time with the Fremen in the film is so short. Like, they seriously cut out the plot point where Gurney thinks it was Lady Jessica who betrayed Duke Leto to the Harkonnens and he tries to kill her, and they cut out the reveal that Lady Jessica is the daughter of the Baron Harkonnen, and it also completely glosses over the fact that Paul and Chani have a child called Leto II who's murdered in the big battle at the end. And they even skipped over the part where Paul marries the Princess Irulan at the end. Like, what is the point of having Irulan open your film if she's just there to be at the beginning of the end but doesn't fulfill her purpose of Paul marrying her for political advantage? Paul marrying Irulan is what cements his claim to the throne, so why didn't the film include it? Like, she's in the last scene, why didn't they include that bit in the film? Granted, apparently this film was plagued with pseudo-interference and a lot of things were cut for time, and that's fair enough, but then again, some of the things David Lynch did creatively was just weird. Like, what the fuck is that? Like, apparently that's meant to be a member of the Space Guild, but, like, do the Space Guild even look like that in the later Dune novels? Like, what the fuck? That's just... what? Also, a lot of the concepts introduced in the book just aren't properly executed by Lynch. Like, he royally fucks up the voice. In the books, the voice is a method used by the Bene Gesserit to control people through the tone of their voice. They would just say words in a very specific manner, in a very specific way, and people would do their bidding. And a key thing to note is that in the book, it's very subtle. It's a very subtle change in your voice. So what David Lynch decided to do was just have it be this weird, Daffy Duck, raspy sounding thing. Like, it's just weird. Speaking of weird, the weirding way is not a sonic gun. The weirding way is a type of martial arts used by the Bene Gesserit. Not this weird sonic gun, like, what the hell? Now, a lot of the mysticism and spirituality from the book is in the film, and Lynch does his best to sort of try and replicate that mysticism through those weird montages of, like, the water and Paul talking existentially into space. Like, it works, but it also doesn't at the same time, because those scenes are really drawn out and padded, and it's like the visual effects just clearly weren't there. A lot of it was just the same repeated shots of that water drop and that hand coming towards the screen. Like, it just doesn't work. A lot of those sequences are long, tedious, and kind of pad out the film for no reason. Now, the narration and internal monologue just doesn't work. I appreciate the attempt since the book is full of inner monologues, it's just that the way the film decides to use it, it just doesn't work. A lot of the lines Lynch decides to use as narration could easily have been visualized through the actors' performances or said through the dialogue. Like, a lot of the times, it just didn't need to be there. Now, as a fan of the book, I will say I did appreciate that Lynch in the script tried to add a lot of lines from the book, like Arrakis, Dune, desert planet. And he constantly uses the litany against fear. And whilst I love those details as a fan, it doesn't really make the film better. I will say, I do admire David Lynch's attempt at adapting Dune, it's just that I feel like in the end he stumbles and falls because he tries to cram in so much from the book to appease book fans that he sort of neglects the film as a whole. Much of the film's opening is just a bunch of clunky world building and repeated information that it just throws at you, and it feels like it doesn't trust its audience to understand what it's telling them, even though it's pretty self-explanatory. Like, I get it, there's a feud between the Harkonnens and the Atreides, you don't have to keep repeating it. I get it. I do really appreciate the little detail of having the Princess Irulan be the opening narrator, since in the book, every chapter opens with a quote from Irulan. Like, I think that's a really nice detail. It's just that Lynch doesn't really lean into that. But one of the greatest positives of the film is the set design, the costuming, the world building, the look at the sandworms. It all looks great, especially for the 1980s. And overall, from a visual standpoint, the film looks quite good. Just, I have one big question. What's with all the dogs? Overall, I really like the casting. Carl MacLachlan is a really good Paul Atreides. Similar to what I think Timothée Chalamet is doing with Paul in the upcoming Dune reboot, Carl MacLachlan adds a lot of depth and character to Paul Atreides, because the character in the book is a bit of a blank slate, but through the way Carl MacLachlan plays him, he gives a lot of depth and history, and I really appreciate that. Francesca Annis as Lady Jessica is also really good. Just the problem I have with Jessica in the film is that she isn't focused on enough. Like I said in my last Dune video, Lady Jessica is essentially the most important character in the Dune saga, because of all the choices she gets to make and has to make. But the David Lynch film to me just doesn't really go into what makes the character so great in the novel. So Patrick Stewart is great as Gurney, though again, he just doesn't get to do as much as he does in the book, so he's just sort of there. Though he is great and has some amazing lines and line delivery.
Not in the mood. Mood's a thing for cattle and love play, not fighting. Atomics! Atomics! Atomics!
Jürgen Prochnow is also solid as the Duke Leto, and the cast overall I really do like. But I have to say, David Lynch, what the fuck did you do to the Harkonnens? Why does the Baron have a fucked up face? What the fuck is this frog juice Raban is drinking? Why does Raban always have this dumb goofy look on his face? Why does the Baron fly around the room like a balloon with the air that's let out of it? What the fuck is this black shit coming out of him? Why is he screaming every line?
The Duke will die before these eyes and he'll know. He'll know!
The Baron in the book is cold and calculating, not this big, bumbling, goofy idiot. His opening scene is actually really cinematic in the book. The way it's described, it's all in shadow. The Baron is being cold and calculating and calm. It's creepy. Here in the movie, it's just obnoxious and infuriating. I genuinely hate this portrayal of Baron Harkonnen. Like, seriously, every time he appears on screen, he just pisses me off and I get annoyed. And his death scene is just terrible. Like, Aaliyah stabs him with a Gom Jabbar and he just, like, floats up and starts spinning around and then flies into the sandworm, and it's fucking ridiculous, and I hate it. Also, why is Sting in this movie? Like, he's not actually a bad Vader Arthur. He's actually pretty good. It's just, what is Sting doing in this movie? Aside from the Baron Harkonnen, to me, the biggest letdown of the film was Aaliyah, because Aaliyah was one of my favourite characters in the novel. She's essentially a little child, like 2 or 3 years old, who can basically talk and function like a fully grown adult. It's amazing. One of my favourite scenes in the novel is when she just walks into the room with Lady Jessica and her Fremen maid, and they just start talking about womanly things like they're all just grown-up women. It's great. But yes, Aaliyah in this film isn't great. You can tell the child actor they got for her was dubbed over by an older actor, and it's not that great. For he is the Kwisatz Haderach. And like I mentioned earlier, the way she kills the Baron in the film isn't nearly as great. Like, in the book, she stabs him with a Gom Jabbar and she's all just like, huh, have fun dying, grandfather. Because one of the things the film addresses but doesn't really go that much into is that Aaliyah is somewhat prescient because she has all the memories of the previous Reverend Mothers, because when Lady Jessica took the Water of Life, Aaliyah was still in her womb, so the Water of Life sort of affected her, and so she knew things like how Lady Jessica was the Baron Harkonnen's daughter and how that the Baron Harkonnen is her grandfather. And so the moment where she kills the Baron in the books is awesome, and in the film it's not awesome. Also, I have to say, the Sardaukar in this film, like the elite Imperial Guard, are hilarious. The way they look in this film is great. They're just men in like black boiler suits, and the main form of fighting is so perfect. They just grab people and just start tossing them across the screen. It's hilarious. Another one of the main highlights of the film is the score. Like, the music done by Toto, of all people, is great. Like, the da-da-da-da. Like, I really like the theme. It's great. Though, it does remind me of this piece of royalty-free music. So when I actually sat down to watch this film, I was like, oh, I recognize this music. It sounds like this royalty-free music that I got off YouTube. But overall, David Lynch's Dune, as much as I've complained about it, is a film that I think I like. I don't know, it's really weird. I appreciate a lot of the things David Lynch was trying to do with his adaptation of Dune. I appreciated how much of the book he tried to fit into 2 hours. I love a lot of the cast. I just think that a lot of his creative choices just didn't work out. As mentioned earlier, things like the narration, the depiction of the voice, the changes of the things like the weirding way, it just doesn't work, and overall, it just really ruins the film. Particularly the Baron Harkonnen. But I also appreciate just how weird and out there this movie is. Like, I admire it. I would say I like it. Maybe. Overall, I'd say it's enjoyable, it's weird, and I kind of admire it for that. But what did you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Hit the notification bell down there. My social media links are down in the description, so give those a look and a follow. And until we meet again, I'll see you guys next time.